Greetings and bienvenue, MITZU. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Anyone else heard of possessed relatives? Someone who was tormented by spirits and such? I had an aunt who was possessed in the early 1980s. My aunt is only 16 years old. Starts acting aggressive and weird. Used to be a nice person. Starts talking in a man's voice, constantly asking for water. Could drink like 8 or 9 jars of water and still ask for more. Used to stretch and cut herself. Other weird things happened as well, like her clothes catching fire without any sparks or heat source being nearby. Aunt would bang the walls of her room and scream in a man's voice, very deep. Everybody in the house would often see a black burnt figure looking inside the house from the windows. Family friend recommended a priest to take my aunt to. Granddad had to call 5 or 6 friends of his to carry my aunt. She had superhuman strength. It was hard to hold her down, even with 5 or 6 men who worked in the railways, worked with machines all day so they were built. Eventually take her to the priest after arranging a date beforehand. An exorcism was done on her, and after hours, the spirit was removed and bound to an object or doll. The priest told Grandpa that the evil spirit was sent to my aunt by one of their neighborhood women, who was rumored to be a witch. The priest asked my granddad if he wanted revenge for this. Grandpa said, "Do whatever you want," and left it at that. Priest gave my aunt a protective necklace and prayers to recite. A few months later, the witch's daughter died of cancer, and they eventually sold the house and moved out. The witch tried to trap my grandpa's household again, came by to give a gift, a wine bottle and some sweets, which my grandpa refused and slammed the door on her face. My aunt is alive and healthy even today, about to be retired after working in the banking industry for 25+ years, is 58. Never had any mental issues or psychotic breaks after this particular event. Still pretty religious.
Pick is from Dominican Hill, close to where the street where the haunting took place. This is a good one from my cousin. Story happens in Baguio City, northern mountains of the Philippines, back when she was 9. The next-door neighbor had just moved in and started renovating the house. Their grandpa was nailing the chandelier to the ceiling and dropped the hammer next to a pile of wood when he was done. Then, according to him, something pulled his leg and he fell off the ladder. The very next day, he fell severely ill. All the checkups came up negative of any illness despite his condition. When the family arrived home, they noticed their maid was acting out of character and irate. The next day, she started spazzing out and screaming. The day after, she would start speaking in a completely different language. My cousin actually went to that house to play one day, and she could hear the screaming from the basement floor where they kept the maid. Cousin says the voice from the maid was 2 people speaking at a time, the maid and an old man. After a few days, the maid's face was so bruised because after one of the possessions lapsed, she'd go unconscious and collapse. Everyone was so afraid of catching her that she'd fall flat on her face. They found out the other language she was speaking was Kankanaey, a rare language spoken in the mountains. Luckily, my cousin's mom spoke Kankanaey. She came over to speak with the possessed maid, and the very moment they met, the creature possessing the maid pointed at her and in Kankanaey said, "I knew your great-grandfather," and started naming her ancestors one by one. My aunt asked the spirit what it wanted, and the spirit told her his home was shattered because their grandfather dropped a hammer on it. It was already willing to just kill their grandpa and leave. But she bargained, and he said he'd be willing to let everything be if they managed to sacrifice a black pig and a white chicken the very next morning. Obviously, since no one had any sleep and who the hell sells a black pig in 3 a.m. in the morning, they couldn't find one. They tried bargaining again and the spirit gave them an extension, after finally finding the pig and chicken. They held the ritual in our cousin's lawn, candles and all that. After the ritual, the spirit gave them a condition. They had to give him a lei every day, which is a practice where families leave a portion of their food to the spirits of the mountains. Besides that, they weren't allowed to be excessively noisy. The next day, their grandfather was released from the hospital and was completely healthy. Unfortunately, they didn't hold their end of the bargain. They didn't offer a lay to the spirit, and they kept making so much noise. The month after, their grandfather died and they moved out of the house.
I consider myself a quite mentally strong person, but I have one or two experiences where I have highly likely encountered possessions or demonic forces screwing with me. Be me. I just moved into an apartment in Vienna. Quite cheap for the amount of space I got, plus only being 5 minutes away from uni. All is well for weeks. I always felt cold in the apartment and unwell for reasons I could not pinpoint back then. Start getting into heavy daily bad habits. Fast forward some weeks. Daily routine limited to sleeping long hours and going grocery shopping. Only hanging with people that have extremely negative worldviews. Wake up from time to time with scratches or the feeling of being choked. One day had enough and decided to take a high dose of acid and battle this thing. I can actually somewhat communicate with him, learn that an old man died there alone and had no one to find him for weeks. Agree to leave him with the home and move out. The girl that lives there now and moved in after me is heavily depressed and, last I know, attempted a self-termination. Old buildings are scary, man. You do not know what went down in them.
Growing up, I grew up going to church as my parents are very religious. At a summer camp when I was in my teens during the evening, around 9 p.m., we were all either chilling in the bedrooms getting ready to sleep, while a few others were making a snack in the kitchen area, and others were still sitting around the dining tables just talking. I was in the sleep area, standing in the doorway of one of the rooms, talking to a friend. As we're talking, I hear people freaking out in the kitchen and dining area, so I go to see what's going on. As I walked down the hallway, a girl I know very well just quickly ran by me, and her look on her face was of confusion and terror. She made eye contact but didn't say a word, and I just instantly knew it was something bad. I could feel her dread, but in my belly. Anyway, as I got into the dining room area, there were about 4 teens standing a bit away from 3 adult counselors and pastors who were trying to pin down another teen who was growling and floating off the ground. After I got in there, other kids started to come in to check what was going on. The adults told us to leave, and other adults came quickly and closed off the door to the dining area. Long of the short, the dude was possessed, and it took hours to subdue him and get him to come to. The next morning, we were all bussed back to our church and sent home. None of the adults would talk about it and would get mad if we pried into it. The kid who was floating, he and his family moved to the East Coast, and we never heard from them again. They went no contact with everybody. This stuff is real. Oh, after all this happened, we would talk about it amongst ourselves, and what was interesting is that girl who ran by me in the hallway, she mentioned that before that incident happened, she passed him in the hallway when she was headed to the restroom. She said hi to the guy, but he had a blank look on his face and looked like he was in deep thought and totally passed by her as if he didn't know she was even there. The girl then got chills and a sense of dread, but didn't know what to make of it.
Hey X, I have a true story that happened to me 4 years ago. I attended a science trip to a research facility on an island just off the coast, and it was with 30 other students that achieved high results in school. Most of my friends attended. The 3 most important people in this story, apart from myself of course, were Tom, Carl, and Lockie. Anyway, this bus trip was around 8 hours, and we left my town at 9 p.m. Nobody could sleep. At about 3 in the morning, I was looking out the window. All I could see was the silhouettes of the trees and bushes. As we went past, it was dead quiet. We went over a small river, and the moonlight reflected off it. And that's when I saw a dark silhouette of a person standing next to it. This wouldn't normally be unusual, except it was virtually pitch dark, and there was no sign of a vehicle nearby. Nobody else saw, except Carl. I tapped him on the shoulder to tell him, and he said, "I saw it too." Fast forward a couple of days, and we are in the bedrooms. They were 6-bedroom blocks, and we were on the 2nd floor. I was playing Pokemon at the time, while my friends were telling ghost stories. At some point I fell asleep and they continued. While they were talking, I sat up in bed with my eyes open, staring at Carl. I didn't blink, I just watched him. Everyone thought I was messing around and they were yelling at me. Tom started to talk, and without losing eye contact, I said, "Screw Tom and Carl." At this point, they freaked out and all jumped into Carl's bed. They tried to wake me up by throwing stuff at me. They threw a snorkel at me, which hit the metal frame and made a loud noise. I didn't flinch. I continued eye contact on Carl. The noise woke Lockie up. He asked what was going on, and they said I was possessed by a demon. He said that was bullshit. And Tom replied, "You shouldn't say that. Demons will try to prove it to you." Shortly after he said that, I said, "Screw you, Lockie." This freaked him out, and he jumped in the bed with the others. They tried to wake me up again by throwing Carl's wallet at me. It hit my shoulder. I grabbed it without losing eye contact, put it under my pillow, and laid back down. My friends decided to leave the room and go to the bathroom downstairs across from the building. They walked together, and when they got to the bathroom, they looked back and thought they saw me standing on the platform at the middle of the staircase, looking through the window. When they came back, they stood at the door for 10 minutes before running in. They woke me up and asked me what I dreamt about. Mind you, I woke up with raised fists. I told them I dreamt about going to the bathroom and finding a camera in a wetsuit. They freaked out because they thought my subconscious followed them to the bathroom and found a camera. The next day, someone found their lost camera in their wetsuit, which only further freaked my friends out. Finally, one of the last mornings on the island, some of my friends woke to see the sunrise but fell asleep. But before they did, they saw someone crouched up into a ball under the blankets of Lockie's bed. They were too tired to think about it, but later on, they confirmed with the others that someone was there. Lockie was asleep there. I think whatever we saw by the river could have rode with me and left. Either way, I know I can easily scare the crap out of my friends when I stay over.
The story takes place in western Massachusetts. 5 years ago, I was driving to work bright and early in the morning, and the SUV next to me was in a right turn-only lane. I was in the straight lane while we were waiting for the light to change. I didn't think much of it or look at the SUV or driver until the light changed, and they also tried going straight. At that point, I looked over as they were basically trying to run me off the road to go straight and veering into me. I was going to honk, but then the middle-aged lady who was driving jerked head to the side, looked right at me, and her whole face morphed into a terrifying face. I don't even know how to describe it. It elongated and looked awful and terrifying, like that scream painting by Edward Munch, but way more terrifying. It's like she decided to show me what she really is, and it changed in a flash. I slammed on my brakes. She, or it, cut in front of me, and I ended up taking the very next right turn, just to get away from her, and parked on the side of the road to catch my breath. I don't do drugs. I sometimes have a couple of beers after work, but nothing crazy. I've never seen anything like this before or after, and I've been too scared to mention it to anyone but my husband for the fear of being called a crazy person. I saw her face change right before my eyes, and to this day, absolutely certain of what I saw. The feeling that came over me was just absolute terror, and the look she gave me was certainly menacing. Has anyone else ever experienced anything like that? Instead of a grin, it was an open mouth expression with a threatening, pissed-off look, but the mouth and entire eye area were black, and the same an elongated, pointy face that no human could just naturally morph their face to make. Really, really freaky. The color of the face changed, more like a loss of color. Everything around the eyes got really dark and had a big, open, dark, scary mouth. I shake just thinking about that day. I've had way too many experiences that were odd. I just didn't want to include them with the story and sound like a total loon. I had a very, very traumatic childhood. I survived a war, had really terrible things happen to me, and saw horrible things happen to others, including seeing children get killed. I was 10 when I came to the US as a refugee and spoke no English. I think that trauma made me more sensitive to the spirit world. I get feelings good and bad that something is going to happen, and it does. My husband and my boss call me psychic. People are also always shocked by how well I can just read their minds. I don't try to. I just know what they're trying to say before they even finish saying it. I've also experienced ghosts many times, including one in our last house that my kids and husband are 100% sure of too. He didn't give menacing feelings though, and never physically manifested himself. We and even our friends experienced watching the doorknob turn on the front and back door, and the doors swing open. He also has a weird thing for oil. Twice, a bottle of oil slowly moved from the back of the counter, towards the front, until it fell over onto the ground. Both times I had a witness with me who also saw it. I call it him because I work as a real estate paralegal and reviewed the history of the house and found a man named Dana died there, young of lung cancer. However, my son, when he was young, swears that a little girl said hello to him in the bathroom there. Things slowed down there and in my new house. There is no activity at all now. When I went to visit my home country, I also went to Turkey and bought these amulets called Nazar. Once I put them in the house, the ghost activity became pretty much non-existent. I'm afraid to experiment with this spiritual sensitivity. I don't want to be bothered by spirits all the time. I went to Salem and refused to do any seances or anything that could attach a spirit to me.
I went nuts once. I wasn't a normal guy, and I'm still not. I had a lot of untreated mental and physical problems due to my shitty childhood. Eventually, the BS in my life got too much, and I went batshit crazy. The craziest was the first few months. After that, it gradually toned down for 2 years. I was death-possessed. Had paranormal shit happen to me before. Pretty sure I have a demon or evil entity latched on me for life. Whatever, I know how to manipulate it for my own gain now.
I had an experience in an old house I was renting. I basically got a good deal. If I rented it, I would promise to work on it and fix some of the problems. This was a city-auctioned hole that had been abandoned for several years and become a local dope house for the homeless. When I looked at it originally, it was infested with fleas. I was wearing a pair of shorts. Upon entering the backyard, a city public works letter of condemning notice for flea infestation. The landlord was caught off guard as he bought it sight unseen. The city came and fumigated the yard 4 times, wearing suits with oxygen to get rid of the issue. Back to the real story of too many out of that house in just 1 year. Now a bit on me beforehand, I've been told by a few friends of the secondary nature that I hold a certain light or direction for the spiritual realm. Sort of a beacon either for drawing them near or to warm them. I had to come to grips with that idea in this house, as I write my entire body tingling as every hair on me is standing straight up. Anyway, back to the story. I had a couple of friends and roommates over. It was a late night for fun the night before, mind you. I had just months prior to this particular incident lost my wife of 7 years to lupus. Her pain was real. That is a whole different story for another day. I had been lounging all day, in and out of the kitchen. It was now about 6 p.m. in the evening, late summer, I'd say August, I believe. I was lying on the floor watching TV, and suddenly I felt a weight in my chest, and my arms, which were already on my chest, were not really crossed, but close. The weight pressed on harder for what felt like an eternity. Some say it was anxiety, but mine is different. I feel like I swallowed a softball, and it is stuck. This was hard dead weight, literally sucking the air right out of me. Then, suddenly I sit straight. Something yanked me up. I'm trying to call to my roommate like a night terror. She finally sees me. Immediately comes to me and my arms won't release. She even tries to slap me, to no avail. Then I flip-flopped over in the prone position, and like you said in the movie The Ring, this dark hair, extremely wire-thin and mangled face, ripping apart at every fold, crawling under me, pulling itself straight to my face and leans in so fiercely. She lets out this terrifying blood-boiling scream and odor like a sewer coming from all over her. Finally, another roommate just getting home heard the scream from outside while getting out of her boyfriend's truck and came running in to help. I hadn't spoken this story to anyone for fear of it returning. To this day, I will never forget that face. Afterward, I immediately called my friend who is gifted, who is one of the people who told me of my gift. I went to explain it as she already knew, and let me know that someone at some time or another had ritualistic, Ouija behavior or celebrations. Those so-called toys are not to be used by anyone who isn't experienced. They can bring unwanted things.
Any of you experience this? As in, you know someone and out of the blue they just flip and go nuts. I'm starting to feel like Frodo when people go mad from the power of the ring. What gives? The world is in a spiritual crisis. Since the beginning of 2020, I experienced this even more. People just kicking off and becoming enraged. I've had a neighbor I had to call the police on, a run-in with a mad bipolar witch, a friend that threatened to slit my throat, whilst joining in on their nerdy Warhammer game. Some crackhead get mad and threaten violence. For me, jumping the quo, even though I was running deliveries and worked there. 2 crazy youths that approached me one night with hostility and were in handcuffs shortly after, etc., etc. It's getting crazier and crazier. Then just this week, a friend who had problems in the past but seemed to be better agreed to meet me. but then couldn't handle leaving the house. Looked like he hadn't been eating, was late, couldn't find where I was, couldn't explain where he was, and basically had a psychotic meltdown. I want to know if other people are seeing people lose their minds and show signs of demonic possession. Don't bother posting just to say, well, it must be something you are doing to provoke them. Walking into a shop, minding my own business, or asking a friend if they want to hang out is not something that makes any sense to be attacked over. I should note that at the start of the year 2020, when the neighbor went psychotic and left blood on my door from hitting it so much, I did experience some occult activity where I woke from a dream of exorcising an evil spirit and heard a literal demonic scream flying away as I woke.
Years ago, I dated a guy who had a heavy drug and alcohol addiction. It was really sad. He would be the sweetest person ever during the day and then get absolutely hammered and turn into a totally different person. Mean, angry, verbally abusive. The next day, he didn't remember any of it. One night I was drunk with him and we were having a great time. We went to bed and it was like a switch was flipped and he was angry and upset and calling me names. He started saying really weird crap like that the Chinese mafia was after him. He was terrified and deadly serious. I'll never forget how at one point I looked at him and he didn't look like him anymore. It was like his face changed to this creepy jester-looking face, but not human. I was like, WTF? Why is your face different? He responded, Eric isn't here right now. This reminds me of a line you would hear in an Exorcist movie. We went to bed and of course the next day he was back to normal and had no idea what he did and said all night because he was blacked out. To this day, I think he was possessed and it took over when he was drinking. He also said that one time he was a kid and he went into the woods and tried inviting a demon to possess him and nothing happened. Makes me wonder.
TLDR, is it possible my father got possessed by a demon after a house cleansing? This is my first time being on 4chan or posting on /x/ in about 10 years, but Google is dry on this for me. Looking for X's insights on the possibility of demonic possession or light demonic possession acting evil after a home cleansing. So here's what is happening. This old-ass house that my biological father and his wife have lived in for years and have dealt with weird hauntings in for years got spiritually cleansed yesterday. Today, my father's friends and his wife said he was acting strange, then he got really drunk at a business dinner and is not acting like himself at all. Is nulting everyone and even telling his daughter-in-law to fuck off. More backstory under this line. Not a firm believer in hauntings myself, but they invited my wife and kids over for Christmas a couple of years ago for a week. We stayed in the daughter-in-law's bedroom and she was with another family. They hadn't told us anything about hauntings or spoopy shit. The very first night I'm woken up by my 11-year-old daughter screaming hysterically at the foot of my bed. While my wife is listening to them explain to her that there were weird noises in the house that wouldn't stop, I hear orchestra music. I half asleep opened the window to see if a church was playing a concert or something, then realized what time it was. I put my ear to the wall and my heart sank when I realized that every wall in the second story of that house had orchestra music being played inside of the wall. The music stopped a few minutes later. I half-jokingly looked up evil classical music and played the Devil's Trill on YouTube, and my wife and I immediately recognized that that was the music that was playing. That's when my dad and his wife filled me in on the fact that pictures fly off their walls, doors get knocked on at night inside of the house, and they come home sometimes to find kitchen knives balanced blade down standing straight up in their hallways. But they aren't stabbed in, just balancing. So what are the odds someone did a half-assed ceremony and messed my dad with some demonic shit thinking they were helping? My dad is 50-ish and has never been an asshole to anyone and rarely drinks, but when he's drunk, he's overly nice.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.